It's Friday. Many things have happened, and we've already been able to deliver the morning in numbers. The numbers are telling you what it looks like. Whether you're looking at fuel prices, whether you're looking at election results, by-election results, the numbers will speak. And as they say, the numbers will never lie. We're getting into a time this morning where we'll have our first conversation for the day. Our live streams are up, YouTube, Facebook, on X, and our audience on KTN this morning. Thank you for being in the Situation Room. And as we get into it today, both our guests are here as we're talking about France-Kenya ties and looking at what happened over this week and where the perspective of the youth comes into all of this. Many conversations were had. One of the big issues was to discuss with youth, with young people in terms of where their countries are going with France. And to help us in this conversation this morning, Angel Mbuthia is the national chairperson of the Jubilee Youth League, and she's here with us this morning. Good morning, Angel.
Good morning, Drew.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana. I'm happy to be in the home of the boldest newspaper.
Oh, thank you for being here. Kasmuel McOure is also here, ODM youth leader, and joins us as well. Good morning, Kasmuel.
Morning, Drew. It's been a minute.
It has.
Very, very happy to be here.
You're keeping well?
I am.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you both for coming today. As we talk about these things, let's look into them in depth. But first of all, as you know, we go around the African continent. Every week we come into a different country and we come back with their proverbs. This week we've been in the kingdom of Eswatini.
It's a good kingdom, that one.
It is.
Yeah. Multiple proverbs.
I'm sure.
And other things.
For now, there's a thing called watershed, so let's stay with the proverbs. A person whose heart is not content is like a snake which tries to swallow an elephant. A person whose heart is not content is like a snake which tries to swallow an elephant. We'll start with you, Angel.
Drew, that reminds me of the Swahili version of it. Ile kupasuka msamba. You try to bite more than you can chew. Mm-hmm. And I think that when I look at my country, I am seeing exactly that. We are digging so deeply into the pockets of the people of Kenya. And very soon it's going to come and bite us back. And I think even there are pastors, and there's a bishop who was preaching somewhere, and he said that the ones who are stealing, they should not steal everything, because they should leave some for those who are coming next. Now we've become a nation that is tolerant to corruption and embezzlement, and we are forgetting that. I mean, how much do you need to live in this world, to survive in this world, at the expense of others, when others have nothing and you have everything? What does it mean? What are you looking? We are still going to end up 6 feet under. I think we need to rethink our choices and stop being this snake that wants to swallow an elephant.
Wow. Eswatini has spoken to you. Okay. Kasmuel?
I mean, it's to me, I can't belabor it. First of all, I think the proverb is self-explanatory. But if you just think about it on the surface level, a snake would still get its nourishment if it stuck to rodents. It would still end up with its digestive or biological processes if it took a rat. However, you know, just like the human condition where we always want more and more and more, a snake could most definitely bite an elephant and kill it even, I could argue. However, it's wasteful to both, and we've seen this like when you see the pythons, we call them omiri in our language. It swallows a whole goat or whatever, and then it ends up dying as well. While it could have, it could be symbiotic, where it could have stuck in its lane, had enough of what it's required, and still, because if you try to swallow it all at once as well, that becomes chaotic. And to me, I think it could be looked at the surface level, but also could be looked at the personal level, where sometimes we spread ourselves too thin. But of course, because this is a national conversation, we see this in the permeation of rapid changes, in the undertakings in national undertakings that we might not have the capacity for, whether it's in government, taking on more too much too quickly, or it's in the citizenry as well, demanding for more without the accountability or the structures that are required to achieve it.
Interesting. Very. I keep saying I think the human mind is fascinating because one thing can bring out so many, angles that we can all learn from.
Right.
So even as we get into this conversation and talking about taking on more than you can chew, it seems as though African nations this week took on a different agenda and said, okay, we're moving forward. I don't know which direction we were moving previously, but okay. It seems as though this week is when Africa now is moving forward. Finally. All right. And that happened because, the president of France made it very clear that he wanted to do this and decided that he was going to do that with Kenya as the co-pivot for this. The youth agenda came into play during these conversations, pre-sideline and post-summit. What are your thoughts? Is Africa now moving forward now that this has been done and the youth have been brought into the conversation?
Well, when I look at the theatre which we have had in the past few days, looking at Macron and President William Ruto and their body language, I think William Ruto thought Trump was his role model, but he just found his icon in President Macron. I mean, the run with Eliud Kipchoge, how did that escape William Ruto? That is a perfect PR stunt that he didn't even think about. And when we look at the demeanor of Macron, even when he was speaking to the young people, you saw how he stood up to in a condescending manner, asking people to hush because someone was speaking. And I remember when we were in school, our teachers would, when you make noise in a class, our teachers would ask you to come to the front and say exactly what you were saying at the back. I thought that's what he would have done as a leader, and asked one of the attendees in the forum to come forward and express what it is they were trying to say from the back of the room. And what I saw from Macron is an inspiration for William Ruto, because he is described by the French people as a man who is cold-hearted. He has a personal charm. At the same time, he has an interstellar ego, and he brandishes his presidency as being he likens it to the planet Jupiter, so giving him a Jupiterian ego and bringing him to the fore. In the African continent, he believes in a top-down leadership. He takes little advice from his advisors, something we have seen before here at home, where we have William Ruto, who is only advised by Samoei, and in other occasions are advised by Ruto, in others by William. Sometimes they conflict, and that is his team or panel of advisors. And if these are the people who are coming to the young people of Kenya, this generation, an empowered generation, an educated generation, as I sit here, I can know real time what is going on in Nigeria. I can know in real time what is going on in Burkina Faso. I can know in real time what is going on in South Africa. We are a much more empowered generation. We are not in the era where we have to wait for newspapers in the morning to know what has been happening in the region. We are able to access information right from our fingertips. And I believe that the Kenyan government fears our mobile phones more than it fears missiles from Iran or elsewhere in any part of the world. And so looking at that forward summit, and like you rightfully said, you don't know which direction we were, whether we were in the wrong direction previously or which direction exactly we were facing. This is just a perfect platform to colonize the minds of the young people. Because the French and the West African relationship has been marred by a lot of geopolitical hypocrisy. You know, the French like talking about democracy, and in the backdrop, when you go to even some of these West African states, it's a sorry, sad state of affairs. When you're kept in constant wars, you have no time to develop your nation. And when we are in an era talking about peace and security, we are not talking about strengthening our military bases. These military bases are the same ones that are going to be used against young people like myself and Kasmuel, I mean the former Kasmuel, when we were fighting for the freedom and for the transparency and accountability of our nation. I think that this era is an era that requires more investment in energy, in education, in healthcare, not about military bases. And the West African states have seen how France has been using the narrative of countering terrorism, and that in their way gives them an avenue to penetrate into their states. That Macron says that the West African states should thank France, and these are the right people we are bringing into Kenya, a nation that we love so much, and we are working to build and cut off colonial ties, and we are welcoming them right at our doorstep. I mean, Kasmuel's lookalike Tom Mboya, if he woke up today, he would be utterly disappointed by what William Ruto is doing to our country.
Okay. Tom Mboya lookalike? I just picked that up. But that was fun. It seems, I mean, from Angel's assertions, he's not very happy with this because it could have been an opportunity for something else. Was this a way forward? We look at Africa's youth, and if we just look at the last 5 or 4 years, Kasmuel, that there have been uprisings around nations, whether you look from EndSARS in Nigeria to Give Us Bread in Egypt to what happened in Sudan, if you want to look into Rwanda, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Kenya, Madagascar, led by the youth who have said, you know what, we're taking back our country in one way or another. Was this an opportunity to do that further with the relationship that has been renewed with France?
First of all, I think we ought to look at it from a more balanced perspective, and I understand why Angel would wax lyrical. Again, you know, as the chair of the Youth League of Jubilee, they need to reinvent themselves, and therefore any airtime that can be afforded them, I think she has to capitalize. It is perplexing that Angel just decided to look at the person of Macron and not the contents of the summit or resulting benefits or lack thereof. I expected her as an alumni of the University of Nairobi to highlight that 5.6 billion will be invested in the engineering wing to further stem and hopefully produce minds that will redeem this country. I expected that to be at the front, and this is what happens when you're blinded by negativity. Is we then fail to look at the issues with a fine-toothed comb. The thing that makes it, and that's amongst many other things, I think out of this summit, Kenya has benefited greatly in the sense that there's 127 billion that has been left here. I might have my reservations about France, and because we're looking at it as a youth perspective, there are deeper issues with this. But the reason why Kenya seems as this seems like an opportunity, and I'm thinking about this in a diplomatic sense, is we do not have previous relations with France. We certainly do not have colonial time with them. But if we are to extend the same for the goose, it must be the same for the gander. It cannot be that, for example, we will cozy up to Britain, we will cozy up to America, and then pretend that when good things are happening to us from France, that this suddenly becomes bad. And I'm saying this fully cognizant of the fact that our generation also we have to step out of hypocrisy. We have to say that we will not work with the global north or with the Western powers, or we will find ways to meaningfully collaborate, and I use this word very carefully, for the betterment of our generation. I'm saying this knowing full well that we're the same people that you find people saying that down with American imperialism, for example, but Angel and I are alumni of the same program that is fully sponsored by the American government. So it cannot be that by day we chant down with American imperialism, and then by night we want to find whatever benefits exist there. And even in the furtherance, of course, I can see what people might be, the pushback might be against, is because we want to tour Paris, we want to all the luxuries and trappings of the French, exceptionalism. But what people are pushing back against, of course, is the neo-colonialist aspect of it, where we do not want to be enslaved, or we do not want an extractive or exploitative relationship.
And that makes sense to you somehow?
It does.
Okay.
I think it does, because we're allowed to want this. We're human. What I think, the extraction, I disagree with as well. So if France were to come in here on an extractive thing, and I see some very valid points where, for example, there are troops that have been brought that are not subject to our judicial systems. I think that is questionable, even in terms of our foreign policy. But then the port in Mombasa, I think there's about 104 billion going in there. Of course, this could be for whatever interest France has, but we also must ask ourselves, are these necessary things? We must either reject them in totality or accept them wholly and find ways of working together, because we cannot remain in a state of perpetual romanticization of conflict, for example. Graça Machel was here, for crying out loud. I don't think that Angel, for example, is a bigger revolutionary than Graça Machel. She's been the first lady of 2 African countries, and her role in the emancipation of our people cannot be overstated. But she was here at the Africa Forward Summit, and her interaction with the young people, she said that it was precious, and she was saying worth. 2, on the and this could be controversial, but I don't see anything wrong that President Macron did when he stood up and told the room to quiet down. First, that's how I know a person who was following or who was invested in the summit, is that if you're here as young people, because remember, it was young people who were speaking about culture, which is something that is rather important to us. If there are people in a room that you have purposefully decided to go into, that you applied to get into, it's either we do away with this whole thing and say that let's just skip to the concert where all of us can be noisy, or let's listen to what's going on, because we cannot be looking for a few clicks and whatever. Again, contextually, the room was very loud and there were several breakout rooms. So I don't see why. If I would do the same, of course, contextually, you'd say whatever it is, but we ought to respect ourselves first before we demand for respect elsewhere. Because if we were silent, I don't think we would have seen this. We would have used this opportunity to further our agenda in a better fashion. But, yeah.
Interesting. Same event, different, opinions, as it should be. Because again, we come from a different set of, perspectives. Politically, the question is, French is known to be looking for a new home within the continent because they've lost their camp from the west. Now they've come down to the east. And in all rights or manners of them having to do that, as they should, because they're in trade to protect their interest, then there's nothing wrong with them coming to the East African part of the continent. However, the question is, and this, I guess this is what Kenyans are struggling to understand, is that much has been promised, 100-something billion. We still do trade with France, we export maybe 16 billion, but we import around 30 billion. It's an imbalance, but that is fine. But the ultimate question is, the countries where the French is living or has left are not more developed than Kenya. To the extent we would say we welcome them because we can see what they have done in Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, and many other places. So why Kenya now? Knowing that, yes, we are the hub of Africa. We know we are trying, as you rightly say, to unshackle ourselves from the colonial systems that have continued to extract and exploit the continent. And if Kenya is seen as forward-looking, hence I guess the name, the Forward Summit, is it the right move for us to make? Are we setting the correct precedent for the rest of the African countries in terms of trying to liberate ourselves economically and also politically? What do you feel about them coming to East Africa, having lost their home in the West African part of the continent, and now they have not left them any better? If I spoke to the youth of the Burkinabes, I'm sure the youth programs that were spelled out 10, 20 years ago have not benefited them, because we would know, as you rightly say, we live in a global village. You can easily tell. We can ask even them now, and they'll tell us. So who is fooling who?
I think there were 2 people who are looking for homes in this summit. One, definitely the French are looking for a home from moving from West Africa now to East Africa. And then the other person looking for a home is William Ruto once we chase him out of power in 2027, if he does make it that far. And when you are saying that we have an imbalance of trade between France and Kenya, they are looking to expand the Mombasa port, as my colleague Kasmuel here rightly puts it. And from that 100 billion you're talking about, if that port is expanded, it's going to go to 200 million, double,
Billion.
triple. The number is speculative. And for Kenya, maybe slightly higher. But what are we exactly importing to this nation from France? We are importing, fancy suits, big ties, and heavy perfumes. Like my colleague Kasmuel here is a heavy consumer, and I find
Britain.
that is.
Oh, he specified it's British.
Point of correction.
He's definitely interested in ensuring that Mombasa port is expanded. And when we look at the West African nations and their democratic ideals, and when Kasmuel talks about I should be excited that there'll be some billions going to expanding the engineering wing in the University of Nairobi, and the youth of Burkina Faso will tell me, Angel, hizo ni stories za jaba. We have not had progressive education in our nations from our partnership with the French. And I think in my earlier years, I worked with the All Africa Students Union, and the headquarters are based in Accra, Ghana, and I worked there for a period of 3 years. So I had the privilege of working in a West African country, that is Ghana, and also touring the West African neighbors of Ghana. And I have been to Benin, I have been to Togo, I have been to Burkina Faso, that area around West Africa, and I have seen it for myself firsthand how dilapidated their capital cities are, even leave alone their villages. Everyone's dream is to work hard, get a visa, and go to Paris. That can be what our nation and our continent is about. And I'd like to apologize to the youth of West Africa on behalf of Kasmuel, because his thinking is wanting. And he does not stand with the ideals of our generation, and it is very sad. When I talk to the West African youth, and they tell me that their reserves are still based in France, well, we are talking about the Central Bank of Kenya kind of model, but based in London. I mean, we would have to be working on a system that
It can be based in London, Angel.
That is based on our former colonial masters. That is exactly what is going on in West Africa, and the French think that they are becoming better, and they're saying that their reserves were 100% at some point. They went to 65 at some point. Now they're submitting 50% as we speak today, and that is the worst form of colonialism ever. And if I was, I didn't have the privilege of attending the summit in the University of Nairobi, but I would have been the first person to quiet down Macron and tell him to free West Africa. I think it's utterly brutal what they are doing to the West African nations, talking about countering terrorism. And in this age and decade, we know that when we talk about peace and security, big conferences across the continent and across the world, when you go into the issues about peace and security, they all boil down to the young people lacking opportunities, lack of employment, lack of spaces where they can freely express themselves. And when I'm sure when William Ruto saw Macron doing that, he was so excited to see him do that. And he admired him in totality, thinking how he can be him and even be better than him. So he should be celebrating. He has found a new home where he will reside in September 2027.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Kasmuel, you look at it from a perspective that, yes, of course, commitments have been made, policies perhaps will be formulated from the summit that could be beneficial to Africa. But you're looking at the original scene, and that's why people seem to be agitated, that France as a country is known to have built its own economy on the backs and sweat and blood of Africa. That goes undisputed. But then you realize that what we're getting are breadcrumbs, and people are saying, yes, I think instead of coming to rescue the country called Kenya, let's build our African Union. so we can free ourselves progressively as a continent. We can do better. We don't need 100 billion. We have that in Kenya. If only we managed our economy better, if only we collaborated better with other regions, either from the global north or the far east, we can still trade and do better. But the art of cooperation is where it's being said that at the end of every summit, because this is not the first one. We've had the Russia Kenyan, Indian Kenyan, now we had the French Kenyan, and many others are going to come. The point is that if we do not take home what is progressively beneficial, not just to the country but also to the continent, we end up shortchanging now the youth, because the future and the present is the youth. We can talk about sponsoring one institution, but that does not change the fiber of the youthful non-economic enterprise that we are facing in the country.
It actually does.
Not significantly, because it has to be at the policy value level where we know when the current president is not in office, the next regime will still have progressive marks that will be able to say we are able to industrialize, we are able to manufacture. We still export raw materials to France. We should have done value addition, at least 1 more, 2, 3 levels before it goes out there. The same way we do not import essence, we import perfume, right? So you pay premium, and that is beneficial to them. That's the disquiet Kenyans are having. What's your take on that?
Nobody owes us development.
Correct.
I don't subscribe to that ideology. But also, too, what's this Kenyan exceptionalism that why do we think of ourselves as better than the rest of the continent? Who says we're here to set an example? I mean, I'm proud of my country, but we're no better. We're no better than Nigeria, we're no better than South Africa, we're no better than any other nation. So I think we have, first of all, to disabuse ourselves of the idea that we are to set an example. All we're supposed to do is ensure that we develop ourselves as much as we can and improve the human conditions of our people and the people of our motherland, which is Africa. We are thinking of ourselves as special, because then we run into very interesting challenges where now I'm lost for words, because then I ask myself, first of all, I say Kenya comes first. So I ask myself, how do these partnerships impact Kenya first? And then hopefully the other countries are going to think of that as well for their countries, and it's going to be better. And it's very interesting that my colleague Angel mentions countries like Ghana, mentions countries like Benin. Those countries were here. They were represented here. So on the one hand, you cannot pretend that you're fighting for them, and some of your facts are awfully wrong. While you wax lyrical, I think it would be better if we kept it factual. Ghana, first of all, was not under French colonialism. However, if you think about it, it's insulting to the people of Ghana to say that you're apologizing to them. They sent their vote, their collective vote was here. The people of Ghana were here. The people of Benin were here. The people of Liberia, the first country that gained independence, were here. The people of Senegal, President Faye was here. So I do not understand what these things of which we speak, that those are the democracies, those are the majorities of their democracies, and I think those ought to be respected. In terms of development, in terms of us advancing an agenda, it cannot be outsourced. We cannot look to France, we cannot look to London, we cannot look to Tokyo, we cannot look to New York or Washington for any of these things. Development of our people must be done by our people. And imperialism, there's all sorts of, very many forms perpetrated by Kenyans. I can say this, that the French have not had a detrimental effect in Kenya as President Kenyatta did. I dare say that. The black man in Kenya has oppressed us more than the Frenchman. It might not be true for other countries, but for the Kenyan context, we cannot look at France as an imperial power and think that France has had greater detrimental effects than Jomo Kenyatta, for example, had. You would think that because he was part of the movement, for example, that gave us the liberation, that he would declassify Mau Mau as an organization.
So just to clarify, you're saying that because France did not have a colonial effect in Kenya, that it's possible that Kenya's people suffered greatly under a leader of its own origin, that there's no reason then why Kenya should not embrace France futurely, which is present.
No. I'm not even speaking about us embracing. I'm just talking about us looking inward.
Okay.
Because most of the times, the argument that's easy to make is the outward one, is to just lamp France as a colonial power and now...
Which they are.
Yes, which they are. And I do not deny this. Nobody who has a brain denies this. But and I'm saying this under the pretext that we did not suffer from that.
Okay.
There are countries that were colonized by France that were here. So you want to tell me that suddenly you want to wail more than the bereaved? But two, because we have not examined our infrastructure, our own power imbalances here. And I keep on saying this, that Jomo Kenyatta plunged us into this whole situation. The Mau Mau only becomes decriminalized in 2003, despite them fighting for independence. Through our first two presidents, we do not fight for that. And then now subsequent governments, the massive looting, it was not orchestrated by France. It was orchestrated by our people. For example, the killings. It's not the French doing the killing. It's the sitting governments here. And so we have to ask ourselves that this development thing, what are we doing as Kenya, first of all, for ourselves? Because you think about Africa as a continent. Our collective debt is maybe $1.6 trillion
USD.
The amount that is held in our banks through private sector, so I'm talking your African Development Bank, your African Finance Corporation, your Trade Development Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, the pool of money that we have access to there is 4.4 trillion US dollars. If we wanted to pay off all our debts, we could. But I'm not seeing anybody explore that solution. And that solution, we cannot say that the solution has been hampered or hindered by external Western powers. They could contribute, but we could make a conscious decision and say that as Africa, regardless, we will decide that, for example, we'll pay off debt.
So Africa can actually solve its development problems on its own.
Certainly.
If we wanted to.
Yes.
So then are you giving rise to the argument that then it's not necessary to be buddy-buddy with another nation who's already shown its hand in different parts of the continent? They've shown their hand, let's be honest. And that they've not gone very far off from that hand. If we were to look into what's currently happening with France and its economy and its, its social justice issues here and there, that what they suffer from today, because they do, is not very different from what was happening in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, whereby they were still playing the colonial hand. Now, is it then possible for us to actually agree and say Africa must then focus the youth? And that was a question I was going to ask. What do the youth of the continent want today? The things that keep coming out. Are we hearing leadership? Are we hearing economy-facing countries? Are we hearing coming together as African nations and saying this is what we want? We talk about this 1.3 billion people all the time in just certain parts of the continent. We talk about development. We talk about an age whereby it is Africa's youth who are pushing economies in different countries. These are the things that people want. I'm hearing you say that these partnerships that people are spending days facing forward Africa, they're not necessary if we look at the potential that Africa has to heal itself from within.
I think that partnerships are still necessary, but we have to recalibrate.
But they shouldn't be the focus.
Yes, we have to recalibrate how we approach them, because how else? I think I would jump on any opportunity to have 30 heads of state on the African continent. First of all, if there are 30 heads of state, I think that should be the primary focus.
Led by Africa.
Yes.
Led by Africa. But in this case, what we saw, and I'm sorry to interrupt you because I want to make that point so that maybe you can answer based on that.
Right.
That who should lead this conversation? Because it was very clear that Emmanuel Macron said over and over again that this was my idea, and I spoke to President William Ruto and he agreed with me that we now help Africa face forward, but we're using an external party to face forward on what Africa already knows.
But is Africa facing forward on its own?
That was my first
yes,
question.
Because I'm looking at it, and until we can face that, I think these partnerships ought to be necessary.
Now that's the question. Is it France that's going to help Africa face forward?
If France is what it takes for us to come together, then let it be France.
Is it?
I'm saying that it shouldn't be.
Okay.
But as things stand, it currently is. I haven't seen. We barely could agree on things like the African Union chairman. We were looking for that. We didn't need France to intervene for that. But we, of course, it went to Djibouti or whatever. But it's the first time now we're seeing outside, this transcended the borders. It's transcended ECOWAS, SADC, EAC and whatnot. If we can find more points of synergy, if we can find more points of connection without external influence, which is proving to be rather difficult for African heads of states and by extension
why
the
is
African
it difficult
people.
in your assessment, which I agree with, but why is it seemingly so difficult? Yet we have the resources, as you rightly put it. In our reserves we can clear our debts, odious and sovereign. But why is it difficult for us to come together for a common cause? We even have an organization, African Union, and all the others you mentioned, the EAC, the ECOWAS, and we have all of them. Why is it difficult for us as a continent to come together and rise to the occasion of liberating ourselves? In your opinion?
Of course, I would love to give an academic, deep answer. But I think simplistically there are several challenges. First of all, there are cultural challenges, which I don't think are that bad. But it's an ego problem. In the modern day, we all have an ego problem. We usually say that there was Western interference, so that's why, for example, when Gaddafi was killed,
there was.
Yes, there was. I do not deny this.
Yeah.
There was, and actually, part of the things, and I know this is outside the conversation. That's one of the biggest problems I have with an Obama presidency, for example, and that's why, for example, I would favor Trump's presidency over Obama's presidency, which is totally different conversation. Yes. In the sense that, what were they doing bombing Libya 8 months after? There was so much war here, and that's a totally different conversation. If the idea was as romantic as we said it was, the elimination of one leader should have hastened the realization of that dream.
Yep.
Then it means that we're participating in some sort of chicanery, in the sense that we claim that we want a united Africa, but despite being given all the reasons to have a united Africa, it still remains to be one of the most difficult things to do.
And it seems as though Kasmuel is saying that, and if France is going to come and lead the way, then why not?
Not come and lead the way, come and facilitate us coming together, because it cannot lead the way because we have our sovereignty, for example. It's very hard for you, for example, to come to Kenya and colonize us, at least not now. You could have economic sanctions, you could have whatever, of course, which is also a form of that. But I don't think if we decide as African countries to just do what is do what is right by our people and by our continent.
Maybe a different facing question.
A different front, Angel. Could it be that Macron found it easier to work with President Ruto because he has portrayed himself to be, earlier on, people have started calling him the puppet of the West. You look at how he has managed our international relations with Sudan, his pronouncements on Congo. They've always been off the majority of the African position. And when he's out there, he's trying to position himself as the speaker, in quotes, of the African continent. So he's more malleable, likable, usable by them, unlike people who will be seen as antagonists of the West or the former colonies of the African continent. Could there be a possibility that the alliance is based perhaps on their shared ideology, which is still very colonial in my opinion, and that President Ruto has not come out as very progressive in terms of the modern times you're living in, despite the historical injustices Kasmuel mentions, which I agree with. We are in a modern era. We have a new constitution that we gave birth to as a country. But President Ruto was not even able to defend that the other day when he went to Tanzania, and the Tanzanian president was saying you should deal with people like you, because both of you are still in a revolution. The former Kasmuel, not this one. The former Kasmuel and yourself were casualties or victims of what President Suluhu was talking about. And I think the only thing President Ruto needed to do was to say, in Kenya, we have a constitution that provides certain rights for people to agitate, and we have a democracy that is totally different. He could not defend that. Could that be one of the reasons where he's been found more likable, more usable, and easily be used to penetrate the rest of Africa? Because even in business, Kenya is the hub of Africa.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You plug in well, you're able to penetrate the rest of the continent. Just
Yes, I think that your quote for next week should be a Swahili one saying akili ni nywele, kila mtu ana zake.
Right.
But wakisikiza Kasmuel najua wanapigwa na butwa.
I understand, but it's not lost on me that Angel has relaxed her hair. It shows that akili yake inayo is inspired by things that are not hers.
But let's not...
the foreign.
Yes.
Okay. Like the French.
We know my foreign. Stories are jabba.
Yeah, it's as natural as it comes. It's mine. So, and let's not misinform our audience. Kasmuel, Liberia was not the first country to gain independence in Africa. It was Ghana in 1957.
I'm saying.
It has never been colonized.
Okay.
It was a state.
It was a free state.
It was a free state.
I think, let's not misadvise our audience. And coming to what you're painting a picture of William Ruto, I just highlighted who Macron is analyzed by psychologists from across the world. Someone with an interstellar ego, someone who takes very little advice, someone who admires planet Jupiter, and he thinks that he is planet Jupiter and all other planets should be dwarfed around him. That's the personality of Macron. And the people of the French describe the French government as lazy and greedy. So even when we're talking about the French people are totally distanced from this conversation and this engagement. So as we describe the people of Kenya and the government of Kenya, two different people. And when you hear terms like G to G, that is where the scam is. When you hear things like B to B, when you hear PPP, hiyo unajua deal imeivana. Hiyo deal imeivana. Nairobians wanasemanga hiyo ni kipindi rei, deal iko fresh. Because when William Ruto looks at Kenya, we do not have minerals, we don't have gold and oil.
We are not tafadhali,
we are not heavy.
Inform yourself on the country.
As a country like Ghana, and at such deposits. And when William Ruto looks at wealthy people from West African nations, there's a very huge problem in West Africa where the rich and the poor, the gap is like 1 kilometer, 100 kilometers, like Kisumu and Mombasa. There is no middle class as you would have it here in Kenya, where former President Mwai Kibaki tried as much as possible to level out our society and give birth to the middle class. That is not present in West African countries. Renting a home in a West African country is difficult. You need to pay a lease of 1 year up front. You can imagine what that does to the young people of West African nations. You have to live with your parents typically until you get married or until you can raise 1 year worth of rent. And that is for a basic accommodation. For accommodation that is good and quality in a reasonable area in the city where you can have access to opportunities, you have to pay as much as 2 years of upfront rent. Same rate as what we have here in Kenya. And here in Kenya, it's easier because you can do monthly payments. As you make your money, you go. So in West Africa, it is characterized by heavy, rich versus poor people in West African nations. And so when William Ruto looks at those nations and the wealthy people around there, he thinks to himself that the best thing I can have is land. So what do? I introduce something called PPP, public-private partnerships. But the P in private is Ruto. It is now an RPP, and I hope Kenyans are very clear and understand that PPP is no longer the private public. It's Ruto public partnerships.
Well, it's not the first time that PPPs are being used in Kenya, Angel. I mean, they've been a method for this development for a very long time.
For this regime, it is quite different. And when you're talking about previous regimes that have had partnerships, we have had UK summit, we have had US summit, but this regime has turned the private to Ruto. When we're talking about a nuclear plant in Siaya, that nuclear plant, the private person that is going to conduct that engagement is Ruto. We saw that with Chan and the insurance scheme that you published on the front page of the Standard. And you said that the reinsurance company that was insuring the tournament was a private individual who had only been registered as a business for 40 days. And they transacted millions of shillings from the Kenyan from the Kenyan government. The private in PPP stands for Ruto.
Okay, allow me to ask. Both of you, at one point, agreed on the change of regime.
Yeah, that was a Paul. Now we have Saul.
Okay. Now, we are 62, 63 weeks away from the D-Day. Also, Macron is going home, I think, next year, thereabout, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And also we have our outgoing president, William Ruto. And many other countries will be voting, just like they've been voting. We saw the re-election of our friend Yoweri Kaguta Museveni the 7th time. The question is, the youth of Africa, because Africa is our home. We just reside in Kenya. That's how I put it. The youth of Africa need to redefine their own forward summit. How do we craft the democracies that you're going to live in and with for the next 20, 30, 40 years? Because the freedom came in the 60s. Then the democratic space came in the 90s, But here we are. I'm sure we all agree we need economic liberation. That's the revolution we are in as a country, as a continent. It's taking different shapes and forms and different pace depending on the country. Namibia has led with trying to deal with their debts. Mozambique, everybody is there trying to deal with their tuna bond. And everybody else is coming up and saying, you saw the west part of the continent, ejecting the French, as you're saying. There's been discourse. Across the continent, we have so many conflict areas, but the people who continue to suffer are the youthful, the young, and also our resources continue to be plundered and exploited. So at what point are we going to converge and have our own youth summit, not necessarily physically, but ideologically, such that when we call for change of regime, it is a principle, issue, policy-based and driven conversation. We can disagree and agree to agree at the same time. But at what point are we going to converge ideologically and say, it's not about the party that you belong to. It's not about the crumbs you get from the political formation you're in. But it's about realizing that if we do not secure our future now, we are guaranteeing ourselves to be exploited, extracted for the next 20, 10, 40 years.
I think when you speak like that, you speak to the converted. Looking at the TIFA polls that were released yesterday, and 76% of disapproval going to William Ruto is a disapproval rating that has never been seen before. And when we are even talking about Jomo Kenyatta, as Kasmuel mentions it, that former generation, I like to applaud him for what he did to Kenya in the years gearing towards 1963. I have been to Southern African countries and I have seen the scars of apartheid, and you will see the colorism, the colored, the blacks, the whites, and those scars are still there amongst the African people of Southern Africa. When a South African parliament sits, first of all, they discuss who is black, who is white, and who is colored before they talk about education, before they talk about healthcare, before they talk about national security. They talk about the colors of their skin. We have the privilege as a Kenyan nation not to have such conversations in our parliament. When we debate on other issues, but not about color and race. And when we talk about countries who visited and who came from West African nations, and Kasmuel mentions them, they came out of courtesy of William Ruto. It is like if Kasmuel today invited me to his graduation or for his wedding, if he's getting married soon.
God forbid.
Then I will go. I'll go and support him. Not because
out of courtesy.
Out of courtesy as a member of my generation, I'll go. But not because I believe in his ideology. The West African presidents who came here came because they are bosom buddies with William Ruto. If Samia Suluhu is seen around William Ruto, the government of Kenya and the government of Tanzania, G to G is an aspect of gangster to gangster. And when we see William Ruto surrounded by other countries like France, hold on, my brother. When we see William Ruto being surrounded by any country like France, that one is just another gangster being recruited to his fold.
In the interest of time.
So, as I conclude, our generation is convinced that we are at the wrong place and at the wrong time. All we want is honesty. Let's just be honest. If PPP is Ruto public private, let's just let it be clear.
Okay.
That's why we are offering ourselves to leadership. I desire to be in the next parliament as a woman rep for Kiambu County, and I will deliver the representation that is needed and that is lacking in 2026.
All the best. I think is the youth for ready?
We are ready, but part of what I decided to do is I will not be a gentleman any longer about mudslinging. A person like Angel, you would think that she's offering ideological pushback. She is not. Angel and her ilk are deeply tribal people, and I'm willing to prove this in the sense that this ideological awakening that they've had, you did not see Angel protest against President Uhuru. She was a student leader at the University of Nairobi when the Kianjokoma twins were killed. She was a member of Jubilee Party. It is not lost on me that Angel is currently trying to sell us Jubilee back, which plundered this country for 10 years. The greatest tax debt burden that Kenya, the debt exposure, was undertaken by Uhuru Kenyatta. The presidential candidate that Angel is floating to us was in charge of interior when bodies were showing up in Rivayala. That's the kind of person that Angel is. So this pushback that you're seeing, you did not see Angel protest when America was here, when Obama came here for the US-Africa partnerships. You didn't see that, despite the fact that we have all sorts of reservations. She was a student leader at the time. In fact, they were begging for the president to come to their school, to the point where President Uhuru, they were bosom buddies. Let me finish. You and Babu at the time, when Babu was writing the letters, I will not take advantage. You let me
Okay, so what we will do is that we will finish.
Yes, let me finish. Let me finish my point, because I was silent when you were you're finishing your point. She's trying to sell us an administration. They're telling us that it's a change of regime, despite the fact that all this police brutality was happening. She was silent. This red that she's wearing is the color of blood. Yes, the bloggers were still getting lost in their government. The government they're trying to sell us to us again. Now she is mad that I am excited that roads are going to a certain place in this place. She is mad that suddenly, despite the fact that we offered a premier statesman. And remember, I have always said that I think Raila Odinga was the leader this country deserved. Consistently, we were mocked for that. Cambridge Analytica was used to prop their government. Cambridge Analytica spread an anti-Raila rhetoric, which is one of the biggest breaches we've had by her government. Talking about France, the Panama Papers don't list anyone but her party leader. And I need to remind Angel that you could be an angel of darkness. You could be called Angel, but she's not being truthful. Okay. So she wants to call me Saul or Paul or say the former Kasmuel or whatever. She must be an honest person, because we will always.
Yes, you do. But what we're going to do is that we will answer the question at this point, because if we're looking at what the youth, and our time is actually blown, so we'll take maybe 20 seconds to get to the point.
Okay, we are ready, but we have to get past the petty mudslinging and look at what our countries need. We have to ask ourselves, ideologically, are there opportunities for us to collaborate with international partners? It could be cross-border, it could be in Africa, it could be outside the continent. But this will not be held on the backdrop and on our personal vendetta against other individuals. If we go on that route, we'll still find ourselves in these positions. We must ask ourselves, what can we do to put Kenya first, to put Africa first? And that's the only way we can move forward.
As you land, Anjo, then a take-home question for you. Because you're accused of trying to sneak back a former regime. You're accused of wanting to sustain a regime that people do not want. Might both of you be in the wrong political formations?
I think that when we say that asking for transparency and speaking on behalf or voicing out the issues of my generation is about pettiness, I think that is the lowest that we can sink. And Kasmuel, it is very shaming. And I would like to ask you that now that we are asking for transparency and accountability, when you are standing and in bed with the blood of Rex Masai and Albert Ojwang, people who are fighting for this nation, who you betrayed in your very own sense and spirit. I want to ask you, Kasmuel, are you in your right frame of mind?
But when you're eating corruption money, from a drunk president who asks, sasa munataka nifanye nini?
Okay, so what we're going to do is that we will take control of this conversation. We'll allow you to do something on the sideline. Gentleman and lady, thank you very much.
Show leadership.
Thank you very
be the
much.
Leaders that you are.
It's 2 minutes past 8 o'clock. Obviously, we're not going to be able to finish this in a sensible manner, but for us to have conversations about where we're actually going as an African continent, it's 2 minutes past 8. Castle McOure, Angel Budia, Asante Sana. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.